Hello, everybody. We're so glad to have you back with us for another fun interview. I'm so excited to have Taylor Westergard. She is a financial coach and her business name is Evolving Money. Thank you so much for being with me today, Taylor.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm super excited. We're heading into the new year and we love to set goals, right? Like that is something that everybody has on their mind. I feel like I don't know, maybe not everybody, but I think a good majority of the people out there are thinking about New Year's resolutions and how we can improve and things that we can get going on. And so when I met you, Taylor, I was like, she would be so perfect to come in and talk to us about some tips and tricks on how to not only set New Year's resolutions for money, but just how to do it, keep it going through the whole year. So I would love to pick your brain and have you share with us like some tips on what you do with your coaching clients, how to help them set these goals and get them moving forward with their finances.
I love it. Yes. So the New Year's resolution is such a fun time because there are just so many goals that you're setting, but so many of the goals, even when they don't feel like they're financial goals, they do have a financial impact. So, like a lot of people are setting health goals, right? And it's the money that you're spending on the food, the gym, and all that stuff, and it's going to impact your budget. And so, I do feel like setting some financial goals and setting up your financial foundation is going to help you keep the rest of your resolutions that you set in some way or form, right?
Right, that's such a great point, right? You're like, I'm going to go to the gym. Well, do you have the budget for that? Do you will you actually use it, right? So good. This is like a great first step into those.
It really is. And so it's like, well, we're going to talk about setting really specifically financial resolutions. It does have the broader impact, the ripple effect of all your other, resolutions that you might have, even if it's something like a hobby that you have. Is it going to affect your time that you're spending in your business or your work, or, that all impacts your financial situation. So, setting those financial goals, it's tough. A lot of people, some people are really clear about what they want with their finances. Like they have a number in their bank account that they want, or they know they want to buy a house. Some people have no idea. They're just like, I just want to have fun. Like, I just want the money to keep coming, and that's great. And that's awesome too. But getting really clear on what those goals are will help you. It puts you the destination in mind so that you know which route to take, right?
Right.
And so,
Absolutely.
yeah. So when you're getting clear about your financial goals, it's one thing to give like a very arbitrary number of like I want X in my bank account, which is awesome. Like that's a great goal, but like why? Let's clarify what you want and why. And so it's something like, if you do want to buy a house or start saving for a down payment, how much of a down payment do you need? How much house are you going to buy with that down payment? When is that going to happen? You have to use the SMART goal method, right? It needs to be specific, measurable, timely, or whatever the acronym is, right? But you do
Right.
need to add some meat to the goal, because just saying, one day I want to be a millionaire is not actionable. It's
Right.
great, but not actionable.
Well, it's such a great point to bring up too, that we not only, yeah, we have to be specific. We got to figure out our why, right? If you're trying to lose weight and you don't have the why in there, it's really easy when you go to a party and they have all the treats you love to like cave and eat those. So when you're same with money, right? If you have all this money set aside and you have this idea of like, I'm going to buy a house, but then something comes up and you're like, oh, that would be really fun. That trip would be so much fun. We should do that. You got to remember your whys in every instance. So that's such a great point to bring up.
Absolutely. And so, like, if you have goals of like, going on a really big vacation this year, figure out how much that vacation is actually going to cost, how much you need to save for every month for it. What are you going to do to get that savings? Like, it needs to be way clearer than it really. So, if you're going to, if one of your goals is to start eating healthier, how much is a gym membership going to cost? What are you buying food for? How's that going to impact your budget? And those are really good financial goals. Like, don't let people tell you that's not a financial goal. It's not that they're just like, because it is. Being able to spend money in the way you want to, that's going to fuel yourself, your body, your mind, and move you forward, is a financial goal. And so I love that you use the analogy with the candy bowl. I tell people, like, if you pour a bowl of chips and you expect yourself to eat half the chips, then you're a psycho. Like, you don't do that. Like, you don't just like walk with a bowl of chips and only eat half of it. Like, that's ridiculous. So
Yeah,
you do need to be able to put your money into buckets and specific places so that it doesn't all get eaten.
I love that. That's awesome. Great first tip. Awesome. What else should we do to make sure we can meet our financial goals?
Well, so, it's going back to making everything really clear about how it's going to impact your situation. You will not know if you do not know what your current situation is. And that's really the barrier that most people have, is they don't really know how much money they're spending. They don't know. I mean, some people don't even know how much they're making or spending, or, where it's going, what they're spending it on. And so that's kind of step two, is figuring out exactly where it, like, take the time to even just do a few months in the past. You don't need to do the entire year, but reflect on the last few months and write out all the expenses that you have and figure out how much you're spending in food, groceries, going out to eat, your pets, your kids, all the stuff. Categorize it, figuring out what it is that you're actually spending money on. And you're also going to notice that there's a miscellaneous category that you're probably going to set, because you have no idea where it went. You're going to look at it and say, like, I don't know what that is. And
Right. So true. Like you're like, oh, how did I spend $1,000 on? I don't have any idea. So
right.
we're actually doing this after I met you, my husband and I like sat down and created like an expense sheet, right? Like Excel, put it all in there. And we have that other category that we're like tires that we needed for the car, or just whatever, or those things where you're like, I don't have any clue. We better figure this one out. So
Exactly. Yep. Yep. It's really important to figure out, because even if it is a one-time expense, that one-time expense is probably going to happen again, just like your tires. That might happen again next year or 2 years from now. You should be aware of those expenses. So,
right.
so good that you're like kind of diving in there, figuring out and trying to categorize it. It might take a minute to jog your memory. But it's really important to do this without feeling guilt or shame or like any kind of, I mean, it's going to be really hard. A lot of people are like, oh, I spent that much on Starbucks, which is mine. And it's like, oh, that hurts. But it's, you know, don't focus on what you've done in the past. You're focusing on how to make that expense better for you in the future. How can you optimize it so you spend more money on what you actually care about? And the only way you're going to be able to do that is if you actually know what you're spending the money on.
Oh, that's so awesome. Such a great point. That's a great point. I've loved just the piece that has come, honestly, from putting things on there. Like it seems like we're being all strict and rigid and stuff, but it really like brings me so much peace to be like, oh, I can see where my money's at. I know I need to be careful here because we're getting close to the end of our money or whatever it is, or if we're going to trying to put money away for a trip or whatever it is. It's really just been like, I don't know, it sounds crazy, but it's brought me a lot of peace seeing where the money's going. So
Absolutely. It's like one of those things that if you avoid it, the longer you avoid it, the more it, like, the problems builds, or the like you just stagnate. And if you know where everything's going, you're like, oh, like we can totally make this happen. Like it's not that hard to save for maybe this and this thing, whatever it is. We just need to make these adjustments. And that's where I will point out too with people is that, like, you do not, well, Britt is obviously really good at math because she's a bookkeeper. And we can talk about how like finance people are good at math, but the thing is that the budgeting side of things, the lifestyle expense tracking is not math. It's self-awareness, it's self-reflection, and being aware or kind of getting to know yourself better and what you value and what you know. And so that's what the exercise, it has nothing to do with math. You do not have to be good at math to figure this out.
It's a great point because a lot of people hear that and they're like, so I suck at that, I'm not doing this, right?
Right.
Great point to remind us of. So awesome. Okay, so we need to know what our goals are, we need to track them, and then do you have a third point that you want to share with us?
Yeah, the third point is a couple things. So, I mean, not a couple things, but the third point is to actually figure out what it is that you value and how to make those, like, making sure the expenses and the goals both then align with what you are valuing and what you're actually doing for your resolution. So, like, if you're setting financial goals like, I'm going to make this much money and I'm going to do all this and this is how I'm going to do it with my budget, the third step is to say, like, okay, well, does that align with the time I'm going to spend with my family? Like, if that's one of my biggest values, does that goal of making that much money to save this much money align with that value? And then you can kind of cross check, you have to, like, this is the foundation that you're creating. And so, like, or if your goal is to get better at your art, are your financial goals allowing for that hobby of yours and the time that you need to spend? And do you have a budget made for the expenses that you have? Or, if one of your primary values is to give, more money or time or service? Like, are the way you're spending your money going to reflect that? And so that's kind of where it comes down to, is there's the only way you can figure out what you value is if you take a look at your budget. Okay. And not the only way, I'm sorry, but a big proponent is if you look at your budget, which is why you have to do that first. Is if you give me your budget, I will be able to tell you what you value. And most of the time, okay. And whether that's like, oh, I don't, whether what you're spending money on, what you're not spending money on, is how you're going to determine what your values are. And where you're like, oh, I don't like that I'm spending money here, it's not adding value to my life, fix it. But you can't know that until you've figured out what your goals are, figured out what your expenses are, and then figured out what your values are.
Well, I love this because I always feel like I think when I'm going into a budget, there's this guilt complex, right? Like, oh man, I really need to cut back on if I like to shop or if we like to go out to eat or whatever it is. I shouldn't do that. You're saying we don't need to feel guilty. We just need to like figure out what it is we really value, and that's okay. Like, and just make sure that you have enough money and figure out other areas of your life where you can put that money towards that. So it's not about being guilty or feeling guilty about something. It's really just about finding where you truly value and what you truly value.
Absolutely. An example of that is like, if you really like Starbucks coffee, like there's no shame in that at all. Like that's just one of the common like examples there.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
if your value is to be spending more time with friends and family, can you join that? Can you go get coffee with friends and family? Maybe only spend money if you are going to with friends and family to that thing, or like going out to eat. If you really enjoy that, how can you tie that in with one of your primary values so that you can get both? Like, it doesn't have to be one or the other.
Awesome. That's a totally different spin on anything I've ever heard on budgeting and stuff. So that's great because it is very important. We want to like make sure we're creating value and aligning our goals and everything in life. So awesome. Thank you so much. That was such valuable information. We're so grateful to have you on here. If people have questions, can they reach out to you?
Absolutely. So I do a free coaching session with anyone. If you just have questions about finance or want to talk budgeting, I do free calls. You can do that at themoneyevolution.com, THE moneyevolution.com. You can book a call there. Send me an email at taylor@themoneyevolution.com, or reach out on Facebook or Instagram.
Awesome. Okay, we'll post that information as well in the notes. So thank you again, Taylor. Appreciate it, and Happy New Year, everybody.
Perfect. Thank you, Britta. Appreciate it.
Bye.